There has been a shift in India's Tibet policy. Discuss the statement in the event of increasing tensions between India and China. Here we have to write about the increasing tensions between India and China. Then we have to discuss the India-Tibet policy and recent trends and challenges associated with it. And we have to give a way forward. So recently there has been an increased tension in India-China relations due to Chinese transgressions into the Indian territory across the disputed line of actual control in Ladakh. Line of actual control LAC in Ladakh. This had led to an rise in the intensity of troop concentration, which has aggravated the current face-off in eastern Ladakh, becoming a bigger military confrontation. Now coming to the background of India's Tibet policy. For centuries, Tibet was India's actual neighbor, as most of India's boundaries and LAC is with the Tibetan Autonomous Region and not the rest of China. After China's full accession of Tibet in 1950, the McMahon Line divided the two countries. In 1954, India signed an agreement with China, agreeing to recognize Tibet as a Tibet region of China. In 1959, following the Tibetan uprising, the Dalai Lama, spiritual leader of Tibetan people, and many of his followers fled to India. The then Indian government gave him and the Tibetan refugees shelter and helped in setting up the Tibetan government in exile. The official Indian policy is that Dalai Lama is a spiritual leader and the Tibetan community in India with more than a lakh exile is not allowed to undertake any political activity. Then the shift in India's Tibet policy. The shift in the Tibet policy earmarks the Indian government actively managing with Dalai Lama in public forums. For example, in 2014, the Prime Minister of India had invited the head of Tibetan government in exile in India, Lobsang Sangay, to his swearing-in ceremony. Recently, the Prime Minister of India wished the Dalai Lama in the first such public acknowledgement since 2013, the first time as PM. India celebrated Dalai Lama's birthday. Some Chinese nationals protested against the celebration of the birthday of Dalai Lama in India. Now coming to the challenges associated with India's approach to Tibet policy. Changes in the Tibetan demography. Over the past few decades, China is promoting people from mainland China to migrate into Tibet. China is increasing suppression of Tibetan population's link to Dalai Lama and pouring in investment infrastructure projects in the region. So the changes in Tibetan demography is over the past few decades, China is promoting people from mainland China to migrate into Tibet. China is increasing suppression of Tibetan's population linked to Dalai Lama and pouring in investment infrastructure project in the region. Then Tibetans against each other. As India-China's tension grow and turn violent after the Galwan Valley clash, China has begun to raise Tibetan militia groups. Further, Indian Army trains the Tibetan Special Frontier Force, which could lead to Tibetans fighting against each other in the future. Then issue of Tibetan citizenship. The Indian government doesn't give citizenship to Tibetans born in India after the cutoff year of 1987. This has created a sense of dissatisfaction among the youth of Tibetan community. Further, in the past few years, the US has also increased its role by accepting more Tibetan refugees. This will impact India's role as a sole entity arguing about the future of Tibetan refugee. There is Chinese dams on the upper riparian areas of Brahmaputra and construction of Tibetan villages along the LAC, which can prove to be a future flashpoint. Now the question of Dalai Lama's succession. The 86-year-old Dalai Lama is not only the spiritual leader, but the political leader of the community worldwide. China has made it clear it intends to announce its own Dalai Lama and try to control the succession. To conclude,